Hello, and welcome back to US Economy Brief, the channel where we cut through the noise and give you the real economic truth. If you're new here, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and tap that notification bell, because what I'm about to share today is critical for every American who wants to understand what's really going on with our economy. Not just the headlines, but the real story beneath the surface. Now, let's dive right in because the latest economic news is wild, contradictory, and honestly a little bit confusing if you don't know where to look. First up, inflation. The government just released the January inflation numbers, and yes, inflation did cool more than analysts expected. The Consumer Price Index rose 2.4% in January compared to last year, which is the lowest inflation reading since May 2025. That sounds pretty good, right? This has been one of the biggest complaints from everyday Americans for years, prices going up everywhere. And finally, we see inflation drifting closer to normal levels. This is a number that the Federal Reserve has been watching like a hawk. And with this data, many economists are saying the Fed could cut interest rates later this year, especially if inflation keeps easing. But let's be honest, that doesn't match how most people are feeling, because even though overall inflation is lower, prices on the things you actually buy, like food and energy, have not dropped significantly. That means your grocery bills are still high, gas prices are still annoying, and rent still painful in most cities. You might not feel like inflation has gone away just because the overall number dipped. And that's a big reason why political and public opinion is still skeptical about these numbers. Here's another piece of news that's been making waves this week. The White House is bragging about strong economic performance. They are pointing to a record high Dow Jones Industrial Average, hitting around 50,000 points. Plus, they're talking up this inflation slowdown and positive job numbers as evidence that the economy is booming. But here's what's insane. A recent poll shows that a majority of Americans still don't feel the economy is working for them. They don't think prices are affordable, and they don't feel like this growth is touching their lives. So while the administration wants to paint this picture of economic victory, millions of Americans are saying, hold on, where's the relief? Now let's talk about the job situation, because this one is really interesting and really confusing. The latest jobs report showed the economy added about 130,000 jobs in January, which was way more than economists predicted. That's good news on the surface. And the unemployment rate ticked down slightly to around 4.3%. That's a level many economists consider healthy. But here's the twist. When you look at the bigger picture, the last year of job growth was much weaker than originally reported. Massive revisions to 2024 and 2025 jobs data showed that the U.S. economy actually added only about 181,000 jobs total in all of 2025, far below what earlier estimates suggested. That means job creation over an entire year was tiny compared to what people expected. So you have this weird contradiction, a surprising surge in January, but the underlying numbers show the job market has been incredibly weak. And it gets stranger. Some private payroll trackers, the ones that measure jobs outside of government data, said private companies only added around 22,000 jobs in January. That's a huge difference compared to the official number. That tells you right away that we might not be seeing the full picture, and that headline job numbers can be misleading if you don't dig deeper. So right now we have inflation calmer than expected, job gains looking strong on the surface but much weaker when you actually peel back the layers. It's like looking at a beautiful cake with icing, but then realizing the inside is half-baked. And investors have been responding to this mixed news in the stock market. Stocks closed mixed last week after inflation data came out, with tech stocks especially feeling the pressure because of ongoing concerns about how artificial intelligence and automation will affect earnings and hiring. Another thing to consider, this whirlwind of data coming out this week means the Federal Reserve has a lot to think about. They've already cut rates multiple times recently, but if inflation keeps slowing while job growth remains inconsistent, the Fed could decide to either pause or cut again depending on what future data shows. And that decision would have huge implications for everything from mortgage rates to credit card costs to stock and bond markets. Speaking of mortgages, mortgage rates and housing trends are also part of this big economic picture. With mixed inflation and mortgage dynamics, affordability in housing is still a challenge. If rates do come down later in the year, that could help buyers a bit. But right now, many people still find themselves priced out of markets where prices and rents remain high. That's another reason why, despite some positive macro numbers, ordinary Americans aren't feeling the benefits. Even more interesting is how this all ties back into global reactions. Asian markets and other international investors are watching US inflation and jobs closely because what America does affects the entire global economy. If the US starts cutting rates or experiences slowing growth, it creates ripples worldwide. Now, before we wrap this up, let's ask the big question. Is the US economy truly booming, or are we just being told a story that makes it sound strong? Based on what we just talked about, the honest answer isn't simple. Yes, inflation is coming down. Yes, the markets are hitting record highs. And yes, there were more jobs in January than expected. But when you look under the hood, the labor market's long term strength is weak. Wage pressure and affordability are still problems, and public sentiment remains low. That doesn't sound like a booming economy to most people, and especially not to the millions of Americans struggling with everyday costs. So if you're feeling confused or uncertain, you're not alone. The economic narrative right now is mixed, contradictory, and frankly a bit messy, and that's exactly why you need to stay informed. If you want more clarity on this, if you want updates on inflation, job growth, interest rate decisions, and what all of this means for your paycheck and your future, then make sure you do this. Smash that like button, subscribe to US Economy Brief, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a real economic update that cuts through the noise. Comment below. Do you feel like the economy is working for you, or do you feel it's just a bunch of numbers that don't match your reality? I want to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next update.